See, Emeka, I don't want our child to look like your ugly face. She must look like me. You don't deserve me. I am too beautiful for you.
In Umuokoro, this was not a conversation. It was a daily morning devotion. In the village of Umuokoro, where goats had more information than the town crier, and even the wind paused to listen to gossip, there lived a couple people used for morning devotion, not for prayer. For example, whenever a mother wanted to warn her daughter about marrying because of love instead of sense, she would point at their compound and say, "If you don't listen to me, you will marry like that." That was how Okeke and his wife Lolongozi became the unofficial village billboard. Every morning in that house began the same way. Not with greeting, not with sweeping, not even with brushing of teeth. It began with an announcement. Ngozi would wake up, sit up slowly like a queen returning from exile, adjust her wrapper with the seriousness of a woman about to address a nation, stretch her long neck, clear her throat, look at Okeke, who would already be awake and minding his destiny, and say, "I am too beautiful for you." Not once, not twice, every day. If Okeke brought her firewood, she would inspect the firewood first, then inspect her fingernails, then inspect his face and say, "This your kindness is good, but it does not match my beauty." If he fetched water from the stream and the bucket touched the ground before entering the house, she would step back and say, "Please, carry it properly. Beauty does not drink from careless buckets." If he even stood too close to her while talking, she would shift away and adjust her wrapper. "Stand far, my glow is sensitive." Okeke never argued. Okeke was the kind of man who would apologize to a stone if he mistakenly kicked it. Gentle like evening breeze, calm like a goat that had accepted its destiny. Every time Ngozi dropped her daily declaration, he would smile the same soft smile and say, "Ngozi, beauty is in the heart." And she would hiss, a long professional hiss that had experience. In the market square, the women had a permanent discussion point. Has she started for today? Started. She has finished and repeated it. My sister counted 5 times this morning. The men under the udara tree would shake their heads. That Okeke is not a human being. He is patience with 2 legs. Children would wait for her to pass just to sing, "Too beautiful, too beautiful. Even mirror is begging for you." She would chase them shouting, "Your parents did not train you." But the children would run, laughing into the dust. Ngozi did not walk in Umuokoro. She arrived. Her shoulders moved as if invisible drummers were following her from her mother's village. She rejected food if the plate was not shiny enough. One afternoon, she used a pot cover as a mirror and still frowned. "This metal is not bright enough to carry my face." Visitors who greeted her without enough respect were forced to repeat the greeting. "Go back and greet again. My beauty did not hear you well." Meanwhile, Okeke would be in the background, washing clothes, cooking, splitting firewood, sweeping the compound, doing everything with the peaceful smile of a man who had signed a lifetime agreement with silence. If she said smoke from the kitchen could reduce her glow, Okeke would cook. If she said soap could affect her softness, Okeke would wash. If she said bending down could disturb her posture, Okeke would pick everything from the ground. And when he finished, sweating and tired, she would look at him and say, "You are trying, but I am still too beautiful for you." And Okeke would answer, "Thank you, Ngozi." Even the elders were confused. One evening, as the sun was going down and the village square was painted in orange light, old Mama Nkem leaned on her walking stick and said the thing that entered everybody's ear and refused to come out. The day this woman carries pregnancy, truth will visit this village. From that moment, Umu Okoro began to wait, not openly, but carefully. Women passing her would look at her stomach first before greeting her. Men would whisper whenever she walked by. Even the wind seemed to be watching. Then one morning, the announcement did not come. There was no "I am too beautiful for you." Instead, a strange sound came from inside the hut. Ugh, Okeke. Okeke ran inside. Ngozi was bent over holding her stomach. She pushed her hand away. "Don't touch me, my beauty is turning." She rushed outside and vomited. The compound froze. 2 women passing with firewood stopped. A boy carrying palm wine forgot where he was going. Old Mama Nkem, who was peeling cassava across the path, slowly stood up without dropping the knife. Ngozi vomited again. Silence spread like harmattan dust. Then the first whisper jumped from one mouth to another. "She is pregnant." "What?" "It has happened." "Are you sure?" "I saw it with my 2 eyes." By evening, Umu Okoro did not cook early because every compound had the same discussion. The child, who will the child look like? Inside their hut, Ngozi lay on the bed, fanning herself dramatically. Okeke sat beside her with worry and joy mixed together in his eyes. She looked at him and said weakly, "Make sure this child looks like me." Okeke smiled softly, but outside, the village had already gathered in groups, waiting, because the woman who was too beautiful was finally carrying the test of truth in her stomach. And from that day, even the gossip in Umu Okoro stopped laughing loudly. They began to laugh in preparation. From the day Ngozi's vomiting confirmed the news, Umu Okoro changed. Not completely, but in a way a village changes when something more interesting than poverty arrives. Women stopped finishing their cooking on time because they had to pass in front of Ngozi's compound by mistake. Men returning from the farm suddenly developed a new path that led directly past Okeke's house. Even children who had never greeted her before began to greet her with respect, just so they could look at her stomach and run back to give reports. And Ngozi entered a new level of existence. Her walk became slower. Not because pregnancy was heavy, but because, according to her, royal people do not rush with heirs in their womb. She stopped sitting on normal stools. Okeke carved a special chair for her, not because she needed it, but because she announced, "This child I am carrying cannot grow in an environment of ordinary furniture." She began to move with a small mirror. If she was not looking at her face, she was looking at her stomach. Sometimes she would talk to it in public. "Don't worry, my baby. You will not suffer in this village. You will look like me and confuse everybody." Women passing would greet her carefully. "Ngozi, how is the pregnancy?" She would smile in a way that suggested she was doing the pregnancy a favor. "My dear, this child is already forming cheekbones. I can feel it." Inside his heart, Okeke would laugh. But outside, he would nod like a man who had accepted that life was a long story. At night, when Ngozi had slept after giving instructions on how her food must be prepared, Okeke would sit beside her stomach and talk softly. "My child, come safely. Come with peace. Come with a good heart." He repaired the leaking roof. He mended the fence. He started molding extra blocks for a new room. When the men asked him why he was stressing himself like that, he said, "A child is coming. The house must welcome him properly." They shook their heads. "That man is not husband. He is worshipper." Meanwhile, Ngozi had begun to separate people in the village, not by character, by appearance. If a woman she considered fine came to greet her, she would offer a seat. If another woman came with cracked heels and tired wrapper, she would say, "Please, greet from there. Pregnancy is sensitive to negative energy." One afternoon, she announced a meeting. A meeting in her own compound for selected women only. The news spread like dry season fire. What is the meeting for? They said it is for beautiful women. Eh? Those invited arrived early and sat in a semicircle. Ngozi adjusted herself on her special chair and began. "My fellow queens, as you can see, my child is coming. We must maintain standards in this village. Beauty must not die." Outside the compound wall, the uninvited women stood on tiptoe, listening. One of them whispered, "This pregnancy will not allow this village to rest." But the biggest activity in Umokoro was happening under the Udara tree. Betting. Real betting. 5 cups of palm wine, the child will look like the father. 2 goats, it will look like Ngozi. Groundnuts and 1 basin, the child will confuse everybody. Even old Mama Nkem dropped her walking stick and said, "I am not betting, I am waiting. Truth does not need money." As the months moved, Ngozi's confidence grew like a tree in rainy season. She rejected certain foods, not because the midwife warned her, but because children that will be extremely beautiful do not eat anyhow. If the soup did not smell rich enough, she would push the plate away. This child is not a farmer. He is a masterpiece. Okeke would quietly eat the rejected food later. Whenever he bought her fruits from the market, she would inspect them like a chief inspector of beauty. These oranges are not round enough. This pawpaw is not glowing. But when nobody was looking, Okeke would gently rub her swollen feet. He would fan her when the night became too hot. He would wake up before her to sweep so that dust would not disturb her breathing. And each time she woke up and caught him doing something kind, she would still say, "You are trying, but let us not forget the truth. I am too beautiful for you." The villagers began to count the months the way they counted down to New Yam Festival. The midwife started visiting regularly. Names for the child began to circulate even before the stomach reached its peak. Ngozi had already selected the baby's clothes. Not sewn yet, but planned. This child cannot wear what other children wear. She described the future loudly to anybody who cared to listen. "When I am walking with my child, people will think a film has entered this village." The day her stomach became very heavy and her movement slow, the entire Umokoro entered alert mode. Women started keeping hot water ready in their houses. Girls stopped traveling far from the village. Even the men coming back from farm would ask from a distance, "Has it started?" Then, one afternoon, the sky was hot and the air was quiet. Ngozi tried to stand up from her chair and suddenly held her waist. "Okeke." Her voice was not royal. It was human. He ran to her. My back is breaking." The first contraction bent her pride. She gripped his shoulder. Another one came, stronger. She shouted. The shout traveled from their compound to the next, from the next to the stream, from the stream to the market. "Ngozi is in labor." Women dropped what they were doing and began to run. Men stood up. Children climbed fences. Old Mama and Crane started walking fast. Inside the hut, Ngozi was sweating, breathing like a woman who had discovered that beauty does not reduce pain. Between one contraction and another, she still found strength to point at Okeke and say, "If this child does not come out beautiful, you will explain to this village." And outside, Umokoro gathered, not for sympathy, for history, because the day had finally come, the day the child of Too Beautiful would arrive, and nobody, not even the wind, wanted to miss it.
By the time the sun bent slightly to the west, Ngozi's labor had turned the entire Umokoro into an audience without invitation. Women filled the compound. Some entered the hut to help. Others stood outside to pray. The rest remained by the fence to hear clearly. The men stayed under the udara tree, pretending to discuss farming, but every scream from Ngozi's room bent their necks toward her compound. Inside the hut, heat, tension, and drama lived together. Ngozi lay on the mat, sweating, her wrapper tied high above her stomach, her hair scattered like a woman who had wrestled with the wind. The midwife knelt between her legs with the authority of someone who had brought half the village into the world. "Push!" Ngozi screamed. Not a normal scream, a scream that carried insult. "Okeke, this is your fault." Okeke stood in one corner, holding a bowl of hot water, looking like a man who had mistakenly entered a war zone. Another contraction came. "Push! I am pushing. Can't you see I am pushing?" Then she turned to Okeke again. "If this child does not be fine, I will return it." Outside, the women bit their lips. Some bent down as if their legs suddenly pained them, just to hide their laughter. Inside again. "Push! I cannot push ugly out of my body." The midwife adjusted her wrapper. "My daughter, whether beautiful or not, this child is coming today." Ngozi grabbed the mat. Another scream, this one louder. Even the goat stopped bleating. The children climbed higher on the fence. The udara discussion ended completely. Then suddenly, a cry. Sharp, new, the cry of a child entering the world. Silence followed. Not normal silence, the type of silence that holds its breath. The midwife lifted the baby. She looked at the child, then at Ngozi, then at Okeke, then back at the child. Her face did not laugh. Her face did not frown. Her face became careful, very careful. One of the women moved closer. "What is it?" The midwife did not answer immediately. She adjusted her wrapper. The baby cried again, strong, healthy, powerful, but the room had frozen because the child was Okeke. Not small resemblance, not partial agreement, complete photocopy. Same nose, same forehead, same mouth that always looked like it was apologizing. Even the same calm expression, as if the baby had come into the world already forgiving everybody. If you placed the baby beside Okeke, people would think one was the small version of the other. The first woman to notice turned her face away and bit her cloth. The second bent down as if her legs suddenly pained her. The third rushed outside and the news moved faster than Harmattan fire. "It is Okeke? Chai, complete Okeke." Inside the hut, Ngozi stretched her hand. "Give me my child." The baby was placed in her arms. She looked once, twice. Her eyes widened. Her body sat up immediately, as if she had not just labored for hours. "This is not my child." The room exploded. "Ngozi," she pointed at Okeke, "you did this." Okeke blinked. "Me? You and your family face." She tried to stand. Her legs failed. She stood again. "This child did not enter my stomach." One of the older women held her. "My daughter, calm down. You carried this pregnancy for 9 months. Ngozi shook her off. "No, my own child cannot look like this." Outside, the crowd leaned closer to the hut. "What is happening?" "She has rejected the baby." "Yee." Inside again, the baby continued crying, innocent, unaware that his face had caused a village crisis. Ngozi looked at the child again and pushed him back toward the midwife. "Carry him away from me." Shock. Real shock. Even the women who came prepared to laugh felt something touch their chest. Okeke moved slowly and carried the baby. The child stopped crying almost immediately, as if he recognized peace. Ngozi saw that, and it pained her more. She lay back and covered her face. Then she fainted. Water was poured on her. She woke up, looked at the baby in Okeke's arms, fainted again, the second time. When she woke again, she turned her face to the wall. I will not carry that child. Evening fell. The crowd outside reduced slowly, but the discussion did not reduce. Some people laughed openly. Some shook their heads. Some said, God does not sleep. Old Mama Nkem walked into the hut at sunset. She looked at the baby in Okeke's arms. Then she looked at Ngozi lying with her back turned. She said nothing. She only sighed and walked out. Night came. The compound became quiet. For the first time since her marriage, Ngozi made no announcement. No, I am too beautiful. No complaint. No instruction. Only silence. Okeke sat outside on a low stool, the baby in his arms. Moonlight fell gently on them. He began to sing, softly, a song his mother used to sing for him. The baby slept, peacefully. Inside the hut, Ngozi opened her eyes. She heard the song. She turned slowly. Through the small gap in the door, she saw Okeke, the same man she had mocked for years, the same man she had measured against her imaginary beauty, holding the child like he was holding the most precious thing in the world, smiling, not angry, not bitter, not proud, just happy. Ngozi watched, quietly. For the first time in her life, she did not look at a mirror. She looked at truth. And the night in Umokoro became longer than usual, because in one hut, pride and reality were sitting together for the first time.
That night in Umuokoro did not move. Even the crickets sang softly, as if they knew something important was happening in Okeke's compound. The moon hung low, pouring silver light into the yard where Okeke still sat with the child resting against his chest. He had not entered the hut, not because he was angry, but because he did not want the baby's soft breathing to disturb Ngozi. From inside, Ngozi watched through the half-open door. Her body was weak. Her pride was weaker. For years, she had looked at this man and seen nothing. Now, in the quiet of the night, she saw everything. She saw the way his large hands, the hands she once called too rough to come near her skin, held the baby like a calabash of oil that must not spill. She saw how he adjusted his wrapper so the night breeze would not touch the child. She saw how he smiled at the baby for no reason. Not the smile he gave the village, not the smile he used to answer her insults. This one was different. This one came from a place she had never visited. The baby made a small sound in his sleep, a soft, familiar sound. Ngozi's heart jumped because that was the same sound she made whenever she slept after eating well. She moved closer to the door, quietly, carefully, as if she was afraid the truth would run away if it heard her footsteps. Okeke began to speak to the child in a whisper. "My son, your mother is strong. She just does not know it yet." Ngozi froze. He continued, "She is more beautiful than this whole village. Not her face, her heart. One day she will see it." Ngozi's chest tightened. Nobody had ever spoken about her like that without fear. Nobody had ever described her heart as beautiful, not even once. The baby stretched his tiny fingers and caught Okeke's thumb. Okeke laughed softly, a laugh so pure it entered the hut and sat beside Ngozi. Tears gathered in her eyes without permission. She wiped them angrily. "I am not crying," she whispered to herself, but the tears did not listen. For the first time since the child was born, she looked properly. Not with the eyes that searched for beauty, not with the eyes that compared faces, but with the eyes that wanted to understand.
She stepped outside, slowly. Her legs trembled, not from childbirth, but from something new. Okeke looked up, surprised. Ngozi, you should be resting. She did not answer. Her eyes were on the baby. Let me see him. Okeke hesitated only for a second and then gently placed the child in her arms. The world became quiet. The baby's face turned toward her. She looked at him, really looked. Yes, the shape of the face was Okeke. The forehead was Okeke. The nose was Okeke. But then the eyes opened and Ngozi stopped breathing. Those eyes were hers, her exact eyes, the same sharp corners, the same long lashes, the same expression she saw every day in the mirror. She moved the child closer. The lips, her lips, the tiny way the baby frowned in his sleep, her own habit, hidden inside Okeke's face was her. Not the face she worshipped, but something deeper, something she had never noticed in herself. She sat down slowly on the bare ground, her expensive walking steps forgotten, her royal posture gone, her mirror forgotten inside the hut. The baby made that soft sleeping sound again, her sound, and in that moment, it was as if a wall inside her cracked from top to bottom. All the mornings she had shouted, all the times she had insulted, all the moments Okeke had smiled and said nothing, they returned together and stood in front of her. She began to cry, not the dramatic cry she used when she wanted attention. This one had no audience, no performance, no pride, just regret. I did not see you, she whispered. Okeke sat beside her quietly. I did not see you, she repeated, this time looking at him. You are carrying beauty every day, and I was busy making noise. Okeke shook his head gently. Ngozi, but she stopped him. For years, I looked at my face and thought I was better than you. Her voice broke. But you have a good heart. You never fought me. You never shamed me. You never showed me my foolishness. She looked at the baby again. And this child, he took your goodness. Silence, deep, healing. Ngozi shifted closer to Okeke. For the first time since their marriage, she leaned on his shoulder. Not because she was tired, but because she wanted to. The moon watched. The night breeze passed. Umuokoro slept, not knowing that history was changing in one compound. After a long time, she spoke again. Tomorrow morning, I will go to the village square. Okeke looked at her. She nodded. Yes, I have been talking for years. It is time to say the truth. She held the baby tighter. No wrapper, no makeup, no throne. Her voice was calm. I will stand as a human being. Inside her, something had shifted. The woman who measured her worth with mirrors had finally seen her reflection in love. And for the first time in Umuokoro, Ngozi slept without dreaming of her own face.
Morning in Umuokoro did not wake gently that day. It rose with expectation, because before the first cock crowed, a rumor had already traveled from compound to compound like smoke that refused to stay in one place. They said Ngozi is coming to the village square. Which Ngozi? The Ngozi. The one that is too beautiful. Yes, with the baby. That was enough. Women tied their wrappers faster. Men delayed going to the farm. Children abandoned their morning errands. Even old Mama Nkem, who had not reached the square early in 10 years, was the first to sit down under the Udara tree. Nobody knew what they were waiting for, but everybody knew they had to be there. The square filled slowly, then completely. Then people began to stand on tiptoe. Then it happened. Ngozi appeared. But it was not the Ngozi they knew. No shining wrapper, No dramatic waist movement, no lifted chin that greeted the sky before greeting humans. Her hair was simply tied, her face carried no powder. Her neck, that famous long neck that used to move like it had its own pride, was calm. And in her arms was the baby, sleeping peacefully. Okeke walked behind her, as usual, quiet. But this time, the distance between them was different. They were walking together. The murmuring in the square rose like bees. Is she sick? Why is she not shining? Where is her mirror? Ngozi stopped at the center of the square. The exact spot where festivals were announced. The exact spot where disputes were settled. The exact spot where truth had no hiding place. She turned slowly and faced the people. For a moment, nobody recognized her because they had never seen her without performance. She adjusted the baby on her shoulder, took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life, Ngozi spoke without decoration. I have been shouting for years, she said, her voice clear but soft, that I am too beautiful. The crowd shifted. Some smiled, expecting the usual, but her next words removed the smile from every face. I was wrong. Silence fell so suddenly that even the birds stopped mid-sound. I stood in my house and measured my husband with my eyes, while he was measuring me with his heart. She turned and looked at Okeke. Tears filled many eyes immediately. I called myself gold when I was only making noise like empty brass. A small gasp moved through the women. Ngozi lifted the baby gently. When this child was born, I rejected him because he did not carry my face. Her voice broke. But last night, I saw something I had never seen before. She placed her hand on her chest. I saw my heart. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. I saw a man who answered insult with kindness. She looked at Okeke again. I saw a man who carried beauty in his soul while I carried pride on my head. Her tears fell freely now. This child did not take his father's face, she said, lifting the baby slightly. He took his father's goodness. The square was no longer quiet because it was waiting. It was quiet because it was feeling. Ngozi wiped her tears and continued. For years, I used my mouth to wound the person who used his life to protect me. She turned slowly, facing every direction. If there's any young girl here who believes beauty is in the mirror, her voice became stronger. Look at me. I had the loudest beauty in this village and the ugliest heart. A woman began to cry openly. One of the men under the tree removed his cap. Old Mama Nkem nodded slowly, as if a prophecy had finally sat down. Ngozi walked to Okeke. In front of everybody, she knelt. The entire square gasped. I am sorry. 3 words, simple, heavy, real. Okeke tried to lift her immediately, embarrassed by the attention, but she held his hand. You are more beautiful than me, she said, because your heart is clean. No drum was beaten, no flute was played, but that moment entered the history of Umuokoro. Okeke lifted her gently, his eyes wet. My wife, he said softly, we are one. The crowd exhaled together, a release, a healing. Ngozi turned back to the people one last time. My new slogan is this, she said, and the village leaned forward, waiting for the familiar pride. But what they heard instead became a proverb from that day forward. Beauty without kindness is noise. The words moved through the square and settled inside every chest. From that morning, whenever a young girl insulted her husband because of his appearance, the elders would say, remember Ngozi, the woman who was too beautiful until she saw her heart. Whenever a young man chose a wife only because of her face, the mothers would whisper, pray she has a good heart. Mirrors do not cook food for a family. Ngozi changed, not suddenly, not perfectly, but truly. She walked beside Okeke. She laughed without checking who was watching. She carried her child with pride, not because of the face he had, but because of the love that formed him. And sometimes, when the children of the village gathered around her and asked, "Mama, were you really the woman who used to say you are too beautiful?" she would smile and answer, "Yes." Then she would add, "And I was the poorest woman in this village because my heart was empty." She would tap her chest gently and say, "Listen carefully. Pride blinds faster than darkness. Confidence without character becomes comedy. True beauty is how you treat people who cannot fight back. A good heart will always outshine a fine face." Umu Okoro never forgot, because they had seen beauty, they had seen pride, and they had seen transformation. And in that village, for generations to come, whenever the morning sun touched the huts and husbands and wives stepped out to begin the day, one sentence would rise with the smoke from the kitchens: "Beauty without kindness is noise." True beauty is not in the face people praise, it is in the heart people feel. A proud face can win attention, but only a kind soul can keep love.